Hi, and welcome to Behind the Paddle podcast with me, Paulson Victoria. Today's episode is titled Faith, Freedom, and the Frontline Abortion Protests in Scotland. So, I was not aware that we actually had protests in Scotland until I came across a TikTok of a news report of this woman yelling at the protesters. And I was like, whoa, what is this? Why have I only just now heard that we have protests? Like, what? So I wanted to do an episode on it and raise awareness to the things that are going on currently in Scotland. Me, personally, this is going to be some of my own views are going to be in this. So my view, I'll straight off the bat tell you, I do not agree with anti-abortion protesters. They should not exist whatsoever. Why should somebody else dictate what you do with your life? Especially a woman's life as well. In previous episodes, we have just covered the religious rules of women menstruating and what religious beliefs and cultures think about menstruating women. And it all gets very misogynistic and it gets very, very messed up in the way that there is no freedom, that there isn't actually any freedom. And you can't do what you want. You can't do the things that you should be able to do while on your period or with your own body. So, we're going to look into this today. So, in March 2025, during the Christian observance of Lent, 40 Days for Life, a US based anti abortion group, launched a series of protests outside a hospital in Glasgow, Scotland. However, these protests have sparked backlash, particularly because Scotland recently implemented buffer zone laws that restrict demonstrations outside abortion clinics. Now, we're going to go more into like buffer zones, and of course, we are going to deep dive into every little bit. 40 Days for Life was founded in 2004. Can you guess where? The country that really, well, the state that really loves abortion. Texas, the United States. By anti-abortion activists Sean Carney and David Barrett. Their approach focuses on prayer, fasting, and, quote, peaceful vigils outside clinics, claiming to offer, quote, life-affirming alternatives, end quote, to abortion. So yeah, in my opinion, my lovely opinion that so many people care about, it's not peaceful. It is not peaceful whatsoever, and we will go into why. So yeah, a little bit from my personal history. When I was 19, I fell pregnant, very unexpectedly, and I remember coming out of the bathroom with the pregnancy test and just saying to my friend at the time, who I lived with and who was a heavily Christian woman, that I could not have a baby right now. I was not prepared and I really wanted an abortion. But I didn't have anybody to like hold my hand or to come with me to the abortion clinic. So because of my friend at the time and having nobody to support me, I felt like one of my only decisions was to keep my child. And I absolutely do not regret that at all. But for me, it goes to show what even with little pressure and nobody there to support you with what decision you do want to make, can literally change your life. And so for the women who do go to the abortion clinics to get an abortion, you are absolutely amazing. You are so strong. And I want all the best for you. I really, really do. So, what is the history and the strategies of 40 Days for Life? 40 Days for Life presents itself as a peaceful, remember that word, prayer-based movement. But is it really just a passive presence? History tells us otherwise. Over the past 20 years, their tactics have evolved. What started as quiet prayer circles has grown into a global network that fuels some of the most aggressive anti-abortion activism worldwide. What does it mean when their volunteers hand out leaflets containing medically inaccurate information? What happens when a peaceful vigil transforms into an experience so distressing that clinic escorts and patients report feeling harassed, shamed, or even afraid? This podcast doesn't just tell you what 40 Days for Life says, it examines the real impact of their activism. Since forming, the organization claims to have mobilized over 1 million volunteers across 64 countries. Now that's quite a hell of a lot of people. They allege that their actions have led to over 24,000 quote abortion-minded women changing their decisions. A figure disputed by reproductive rights groups. There is no evidence of this whatsoever. Their actions have led to this. No evidence whatsoever. They've just picked a number. They also claim 136 abortion clinic workers have quit due to their protests. Now, if I'm completely honest, that is disgusting. For you to have done that bad, especially in this economy, you have done the worst to harass, intimidate workers that they have actually quit their jobs. That's disgusting. You don't know their financial situation, you don't know their household situation, you don't know them mentally, and you have caused them to quit their jobs. That is messed up. You should not be proud of that. The group has expanded globally with strong presences in the UK, Canada, Australia, and parts of Europe. While they brand their activities as non-confrontational, critics argue that their presence outside clinics often leads to harassment, intimidation, and misinformation being spread to vulnerable patients. So, the Glasgow protest, 40 Days for Life, has targeted Queen Elizabeth University Hospital in Glasgow, a major facility that provides abortion care, among other care. So they're not only just affecting the people at the abortion clinic, they're affecting everybody else who is going there for different types of treatment. So much harassment, so much humiliation that they try to put on to these women who go to the abortion clinics. It's disgusting. The women who are going to the abortion clinics for abortions are so brave. So fucking brave. And you tried to tear them down. Why? Because of your own agenda? Disgusting. Go out and actually help the children that are all in the foster care system, that don't have homes to go to. Go help the homeless children. Actually help the ones that need help and want help, that ask for help. But obviously, that would mean they have a bit of a brain cell to figure that out. But they don't have that, clearly. The protests started in early March 2025 and are planned to continue throughout Lent, ending around Easter. They have pledged to respect Scotland's buffer zone law by staying outside the 200-metre perimeter. However, pro-choice activists argue that even outside the legal boundary, the protests create a hostile environment for patients seeking care. Anybody can see that. Absolutely anybody. Their goal, the protesters, is to disrupt what is happening and what is going on. Like, don't pretend. This is what your goal is. Because you're not being silent. You're giving out fake leaflets. You're giving out... You're showing on these billboards fetuses. You're really... So these protests involve silent prayer groups near the clinic entrances, volunteers distributing anti-abortion pamphlets containing misleading medical information, which can be so dangerous in so many ways. Some protesters reportedly holding signs with graphic images of fetuses, although 40 Days for Life officially states they do not endorse this practice. Okay? Like, the NRA, they do not endorse people doing mass school shootings with their guns, but it still happens just because you don't, quote, endorse it. It can still happen, absolutely. Blatantly blind of somebody to go, oh, we don't endorse it. Yes, so you've recognized that it can happen. You've acknowledged that it is a potential, but you're not going to do anything about it. So what are the buffer zones? Buffer zones are designated areas around healthcare facilities that restrict protests to protect patient privacy and prevent intimidation. Well, that's not happening, is it? Intimidation is happening. It is not being prevented whatsoever. And the protesters can literally see your identity. These zones do not prohibit protests outright, but ensure it happens at a reasonable distance. In Scotland, the law applies to any location where abortion services are provided. So why did Scotland pass this law? Scotland has seen increasing anti-abortion protests in recent years, particularly outside clinics in Glasgow, Edinburgh and Aberdeen, the main cities in Scotland. A report from Back Off Scotland, a pro-choice advocacy group, documented over 100 cases of harassment at clinics between 2019 and 2023. Some instances included women being followed and filmed outside hospitals. Wonderful, so there's a privacy bit gone. Protesters handing out medically inaccurate leaflets claiming abortions cause infertility and mental illness. Emotional distress reported by clinic staff who face daily harassment. It's absolutely disgusting that the protesters can say this is absolutely okay. And they don't see any wrong in their actions, because why would they? They think they are right. In 2023, the Abortion Services Safe Access Zone Scotland Act was passed, creating a 200-metre buffer zones around all abortion-providing facilities. The law was modelled after similar protections in England. Ealing Clinic introduced the UK's first buffer zone in 2018, Northern Ireland 2022, Australia and Canada, which have had strong protections for years. If you violate the buffer zone law, it can result in a fine or up to 6 months in prison. A spokesperson for 40 Days for Life Scotland stated, "We respect the law and are committed to peaceful prayer. Our presence is a witness to the sanctuary of life and we offer compassionate alternative abortion." we offer compassionate alternatives to abortion. So, are they going to pay for the childcare? Are they going to pay your rent? Are they going to pay for the diapers and the food? No, they're just going to hand you a leaflet, maybe say a few words. They're not going to help. In this economy currently, childcare, especially the prices for childcare, are extortionate right now. To the point where it would be more beneficial if you didn't work, because it would make no sense to put your child in nursery or daycare, childcare, any type, then work full time, because you'd earn barely the same amount you would on benefits. So that part can come under poverty, which the government needs to sort out. They argue that buffer zones infringe on their religious freedom and free speech. Well, isn't that hypocritical, really? Statements from pro-choice activists, Back Off Scotland, leading the campaign group for buffer zones, responded. The very presence of anti-choice protesters near clinics creates a climate of fear and judgment. It is not about prayer, it is about controlling women's choices. They highlight testimonies from patients who say they felt pressured, shamed, or even unsafe walking into clinics. The Scottish Government have reaffirmed its commitment to protecting access to abortion services. The First Minister, Hamza Yousaf, stated, "Everyone has the right to seek legal health care, free from harassment. The buffer zone law ensures that right is upheld." End quote. But really, how is the government, how have they reaffirmed its commitment to protecting access to abortion services? What have they actually done? They've put this buffer law in place. It's worked a little bit, but people are still getting humiliated, shamed, intimidated. Something else needs to change, something else needs to happen. NHS Scotland reports that healthcare staff have experienced reduced stress and anxiety since the buffer zones were enforced, but they are still monitoring protest activity closely. The introduction of Scotland's 200-metre buffer zones was a direct response to escalating tensions and mounting evidence of patient intimidation. But were these laws truly necessary? This little segment of the podcast dives deep into the years of reports from patients who were followed, filmed, and confronted outside clinics, the emotional toll on healthcare workers, and the increasing presence that led to Scotland being one of the latest nations to legislate against targeted protests outside abortion providers. We examine how similar laws in England, Northern Ireland, Australia, and Canada have affected anti-abortion protests, and whether Scotland's legal framework goes far enough to protect those seeking care. Real-world responses from activists, government officials, and law enforcement. The voices in this debate are passionate, unyielding, and deeply invested in their cause. On one side, you have 40 Days for Life activists who claim they are exercising their right for free speech and religious expression. On the other, pro-choice campaigners insist that no one should have to endure public scrutiny when making personal healthcare decisions. As you just heard about Back Off Scotland activists who argue that buffer zones are not just about convenience, they are about safety and dignity. Scotland's government officials who insist that protecting patients from harassment is a legal and moral duty. Law enforcement caught in the middle, ensuring protests remain lawful while responding to reports of intimidation. This isn't just about telling you what's happening, it's about immersing you in the heart of the fight, the raw emotion, the deeply personal stakes, and the very real consequences of these protests. Because when we talk about abortion rights, we're talking about human lives, autonomy, and the lengths of which people will go to control or protect them. And this is just the beginning. The origins of anti-abortion protests outside clinics date back to 1970s, particularly in the US, following Roe v. Wade, 1973. The rise of groups like Operation Rescue in the 1980s saw an escalation of verbal persuasion to physical blockades. In the UK, protests gained momentum in 1990s, influenced by American-style tactics. Outside of the West, anti-abortion activism has also been prompted, often backed by religious organizations. Ealing Clinic Buffer Zone in the UK. In 2018, the Ealing Council became the first in the UK to enforce a Public Spaces Protection Order, PSPO, creating a buffer zone around a Marie Stopes clinic. The anti-abortion movement in Scotland does not exist in isolation. It is deeply influenced by global networks, particularly those in the United States, where religious organizations, political lobbying groups, and grassroots activists have spent decades refining strategies to limit abortion access. This section explores how international anti-abortion activism has shaped protests in Scotland, the transnational funding and influence behind groups like 40 Days for Life, and how abortion laws in other European nations compare. The roots of 40 Days for Life are firmly planted in American soil. Founded in 2004, as we've spoke about, they do say they want to do peaceful prayers and all that stuff, sidewalk counseling, and public demonstrations. They obviously rely on trying to sway the public into being on their side, that you shouldn't get an abortion for whatever reason. And they use the same tactics all around the world. The Scottish branches do receive direct training, resources, and support from US headquarters, including talking points, campaign materials, and financial backing. We're going to go further into that. Scottish anti-abortion activists borrow heavily from the US legal tactics designed to challenge reproductive rights. So as we've discussed, the buffer zone clearly is religious discrimination. It stops their free speech and freedom of what they want to do. Crisis Pregnancy Centers, CPSs, these US-style centers, which present themselves as medical clinics but provide misleading anti-abortion information, are gaining traction in Scotland. Some are directly affiliated with American networks. Again, Scottish anti-abortion groups benefit from funding and lobbying efforts connected to American evangelical and conservative Catholic movements. The Alliance Defending Freedom, a powerful US-based legal organization with deep ties to anti-abortion laws worldwide, has been involved in UK legal cases challenging reproductive rights. Right to Life UK and Christian Concern, UK-based groups with financial and ideological connections to American organizations, coordinating on campaigns against anti-buffer zones and abortion access. The last one is the role of US evangelical churches. Some Scottish anti-abortion efforts are linked to churches influenced by American-style evangelicalism, blending religion with activism. Abortion laws and protest regulations vary widely across Europe. While Scotland is moving toward greater protections, other nations provide a useful comparison. In France, abortion law is legal up until 14 weeks, Germany 12 weeks with counselling, Spain up until 14 weeks. Poland, there is a near total ban on abortion. Ireland, 12 weeks. since 2018. Northern Ireland, legal since 2020. With Poland, they only allow abortion when a woman's life or health is at risk, or if the pregnancy results from a criminal act such as rape or incest. Now, we most likely will be talking about the US and what is currently going on in the US as well, because I do want to make light of the situations which are just going on in the world right now, not specifically just Scotland, because I do understand that a few politicians here in the UK, they do actually want to bring in abortion laws to match the US. And that is certainly not what we want here. We want our freedom. We want to choose what we do with our bodies. So, with the clinic protest laws, in France, protests are banned near clinics. In Germany, some cities enforced buffer zones, but they aren't nationwide. In Spain, new law criminalizes harassment outside of clinics. In Poland, there is no legal protections against protests. Ireland, buffer zones are under discussion but not yet implemented. And in Northern Ireland, buffer zones legislated in 2022. So we're going to deep dive a little bit more into that. In France, laws passed in 2017 made it illegal to intimidate or obstruct abortion patients, with harsh penalties for spreading false medical information. In Spain, in 2022, Spain criminalized harassment outside abortion clinics, making it punishable by fines or jail time. Canada and Australia, both countries have well-established buffer zones ranging from 50 to 150, with strict enforcement against protesters who violate them. Sadly, there are countries which are more aggressive towards abortion laws. Poland, with one of the strictest abortion bans in Europe, anti-abortion activism is deeply entrenched, often backed by the Catholic Church. Hungary, government-funded campaigns discourage abortion, and protests outside clinics are common. Anti-abortion groups operate as part of a larger transnational movement, sharing strategies, funding, and legal tactics. As I've stated previously in this podcast, it is very clear to see that World Congress of Families, a global coalition promoting conservative policies on abortion, LGBTQ+ rights, and gender roles with connections to activists in Scotland. European Centre for Law and Justice, the European arm of the ADF, involved in legal battles against reproductive rights across the continent. So, as I said, I actually saw this on TikTok, of all things. And that's what made me want to do a podcast episode. It's very crazy how there is so much out there online that gets captured by video these days. TikTok and Instagram, young activists are recruited and radicalized through viral content about post-abortion regret and saving the unborn. Disinformation websites, false medical claims about abortion risks circulate widely, often mimicking legitimate health resources. As you've heard, it clearly isn't just Scotland, it's everywhere, it's the whole world. It is shaped by so many protesters. So I also actually wanted to include the impact on LGBTQ+ individuals. How abortion isn't just a quote woman's issue. Now, here at this podcast, we do talk about everybody, and I literally mean everybody. In the mainstream conversation around abortion, often assumes that only cisgender women need access. In reality, trans men, non-binary people, and gender non-confirming individuals also experience pregnancy and require abortion services. Now, this is why at the start I only mentioned women, because I wanted to put this segment in as a BAM! wow, because I really want to open up people's minds into the reality of the world where it isn't just women who are experiencing this. Yes, there is a massive majority, but there are still other people, especially in the LGBTQ plus community, and that does not mean that I am pushing. Now, this does not mean I am pushing cisgendered women to the side. Absolutely not. There is just a few more people that should be included that are affected by these protests. And I feel like they're a little bit forgotten about. As well as the protesters and the staff do not get the correct pronouns correct. There is a psychological toll of gender dysphoria. Pregnancy can be extremely dysphoric experience for trans men and non-binary individuals. Client protests exacerbate distress by forcing them into an environment where they may already feel vulnerable. Many of the religious organizations behind anti-abortion protests also oppose the LGBTQ plus rights, seeing both abortion and queer identities as threats to traditional gender roles. Organizations like Christian Concern and Alliance Defending Freedom, which challenge abortion access in Scotland, have also fought against LGBTQ plus protections, same-sex marriage, and trans rights. Some protesters equate abortion with sexual immorality, using homophobic and transphobic rhetoric to shame LGBTQ plus patients. Some anti-abortion groups run crisis pregnancy centers that also promote conversion therapy or refuse care to LGBTQ plus individuals. In Scotland and the UK, people of colour, especially Black and South Asian individuals, are more likely to experience unintended pregnancies due to systematic healthcare. Immigrants may struggle to access abortion due to language difficulties, lack of knowledge about their rights, or fear of interacting with authorities. Some visa categories in the UK restrict access to NHS services, making it harder for migrant women and non-binary people to get abortions. And again, when it comes to the LGBTQ plus community, you're usually going to a, quote, woman's clinic. And that can be very challenging for somebody who just doesn't see themselves as a woman. And sadly, that is the only option, and that sadly is the only wording of the clinic. So it can be a lot with the mental toll of just getting an abortion, and then everything else on top of that is so much more heightened. Even with the NHS covering abortion services, financial insecurity makes access difficult. Many rural areas in Scotland have no local abortion clinics, forcing individuals to travel to cities like Glasgow or Edinburgh. This disproportionately affects low-income people. Those with jobs that don't offer paid leave or flexible hours may struggle to take time off for an appointment. And this also includes with taking time off to actually have a child or to actually rest up and take care of yourself after the abortion. Protesters do create a hostile environment that can cause someone to delay or cancel an appointment. And for those who are struggling financially, or rescheduling might not be an option. Again, you've got so many other components. With wanting an abortion, these centres, the crisis pregnancy centres, target the poor. These centres often lure in low-income individuals by offering them free services, but they instead spread misinformation and pressure people into continuing pregnancies. Again, they're not going to help you. Scotland's buffer zone laws are a crucial step in protecting access to abortion, but additional measures are needed to ensure reproductive justice for all marginalised groups. I personally think that the staff do need more training towards the LGBTQ plus and cultural competency training for healthcare providers, ensuring trans, non-binary and radicalised patients receive respectful and informed care. There needs to be better funding for abortion services in rural and low-income areas, which will reduce travel costs and wait times. There needs to be a regulation of crisis pregnancy centres, preventing them from spreading medical misinformation and exploiting vulnerable communities. There also needs to be stronger anti-harassment laws, expanding legal protections that include targeted harassment of LGBTQ plus individuals seeking care. Now, I do not want anybody to think that because I've included the LGBTQ plus community, I do not want people to think that, oh, she's talking about the LGBTQ plus community, this is all what it's about. It's not. There are many, many different people in the world. Not all of them say that they are a woman. Not all of them see themselves as a woman. So I do believe we should just respect what certain individuals want and want to be seen as and want to be called. The fight for abortion rights is not just about reproductive choice, it's about who has the ability to access that choice safely and without discrimination. LGBTQ plus individuals, people of colour, immigrants, and low-income people face unique barriers to abortion care, many of which are amplified by anti-abortion protesters. Anti-abortion activism in Scotland is deeply intertwined with other forms of discrimination, including homophobia, transphobia, racism, and classism. True reproductive justice requires an intersectional approach, one that acknowledges the needs of all the people affected by abortion restrictions, not just cisgender women. While anti-abortion protests outside clinics have been a long-standing issue, a growing movement of clinic escorts and counter-protesters in Scotland are fighting back to ensure safe access to reproductive health care. This is going to be a deep dive which explores the roles of clinic escorts, the strategies they use, the dangers they face, and the broader impact of counter-protests in the fight for abortion rights. So what are clinic escorts? Clinic escorts are volunteers who help patients safely enter abortion clinics while shielding them from harassment, intimidation, and misspread information by anti-abortion protesters. Unlike counter-protesters who engage directly with anti-abortion activists, clinic escorts focus solely on patient safety, guiding patients past protesters. Escorts meet patients at a distance from the clinic and walk them inside, preventing protesters from blocking their path or engaging them in conversation. Providing emotional support, many patients feel anxious or scared when confronted by protesters. Escorts reassure them and create a sense of security. Again, you've got so many emotions in the first place going into even thinking about the abortion clinics. And the fact that the escorts are there to block the path from the protesters and to stop the protesters engaging in conversation when all originally they were meant to be doing was peaceful vigils and like make it make sense. So the clinic escorts do also have de-escalation tactics. When protesters become aggressive, escorts use verbal and non-verbal techniques to defuse tension and prevent violence. The fact that that is even needed, and the fact that none of the the 40 Days for Life campaign won't even admit that that goes on, or if they do, it's not their fault and it's not in their campaign and it's not what their protesters are meant to do. So, not just 40 Days for Life campaign, other anti-abortion groups have staged demonstrations outside clinics, often using aggressive tactics. Holding graphic signs, many protesters display medically inaccurate and distressing images of fetuses and dismembered body parts. Some stand directly in front of clinic doors or station themselves along narrow walkways to force patients to interact with them. While framed as peaceful, this often serves as a form of public shaming and intimidation, as well as the fact that the protesters also pray and sing loudly. Some groups record people entering clinics and post their images online to shame them, so they dox the patients and film them. As we've already discussed, they hand out misinformation that abortion causes infertility, breast cancer, or mental health disorders. Claims widely debunked by medical professionals. I mean, you don't need to be a medical professional, I feel, to realize that is so wrong, that it does not happen. Many patients report feeling fearful, guilty, or even reconsidering their decision due to harassment. Some patients, especially younger or more vulnerable individuals, turn away entirely. Not to mention, seeing a vocal, hostile presence outside clinics reinforces cultural and religious shame around abortion. As we've clearly heard, many anti-abortion groups claim to be peaceful. Some activists, however, have been physically assaulted or harassed. Law enforcement in Scotland has historically been more likely to disperse pro-choice counter-protesters than anti-abortion activists, citing disruption. Legal grey areas before the buffer zone were incited. So these are just some of the challenges and risks faced by the clinic escorts and counter-protesters. The amount of trauma that they constantly witness patients being in distress, dealing with aggressive protesters, and experiencing threats. I would absolutely understand and expect that it does take a heavy toll, a heavy emotional, mental toll. And I'm sure they must get burnout and fatigue because many clinic escorts report exhaustion from repeated confrontations and the emotional weight of their work. I know this isn't saying, that they should quit. Fuck no. Despite the risks, these efforts have proven crucial in protecting abortion access. Reduced patient dropout rates. Studies from the US and UK show that the presence of clinic escorts significantly reduces the number of patients who cancel or delay abortions due to protesters. Public pressure for buffer zones, counter-protests have drawn attention to harassment, increasing support for legislation protecting clinics. Community solidarity and awareness. These efforts have strengthened the pro-choice movement in Scotland and encouraged more people to speak out. So, how can Scotland actually improve clinic safety? I believe expanding buffer zones. There needs to be legal protection for client escorts. Recognizing escorts as essential healthcare volunteers can provide legal safeguards. There needs to absolutely be more public education about abortion, about what can actually happen if you carry a child to term, and you could potentially risk your life in so many different ways, and it could end in you dying, or poverty, or severe depression. There needs to be more education about anti-abortion harassment and how it can further reduce stigma and increased support for safe access. Raising awareness about anti-abortion harassment can further reduce stigma and increase support for safe access. So recently we did do an episode about different types of religions and how they saw the menstrual cycle. So we're going to touch actually on the Christian teachings and the quote sanctuary of life doctrine and what biblical interpretations there are. While the Bible does not explicitly mention abortion, many Christian groups interpret passages like Psalm 139 verse 13, quote, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb." They use that as evidence that life begins at conception. Theological belief in personhood. Catholic doctrine teaches that a fetus is a human being with a soul from the moment of conception, making abortion equivalent to murder. Papal declarations and church doctrine. The Catholic Church has been officially opposed to abortion for centuries, with Pope John Paul II, Evangelium Vitae, 1995, reinforcing its absolute opposition. The Catholic Church, historically, the Church has lobbied against abortion laws, funding crisis pregnancy centers and supporting groups like 40 Days for Life. Evangelical and protest groups, some conservative protest demonstrations have aligned with Catholic efforts emphasizing, quote, pro-family and, quote, pro-life values. International religious influence, American-style Christian activism has made its way to Scotland, with US-based organizations providing funding and training for local anti-choice groups. So, the influence of faith-based hospitals and healthcare providers. Religious institutes don't just influence policy, they also run many hospitals and healthcare services. This can create barriers to abortion access, especially when these hospitals refuse to provide services based on religious beliefs. Refusal to provide abortions. Catholic hospitals typically prohibit abortion even in cases of medical necessity due to directives from the Vatican. Some healthcare workers in Scotland claim religious exemptions to avoid participating in abortion procedures. In areas where faith-based hospitals are the only healthcare provider, patients may be forced to travel long distances for abortion care. While Scotland has publicly funded NHS, religious influence still affects policies and practices. Some NHS doctors invoke conscientious objection clauses to refuse abortion referrals, delaying patient access to care. And of course, I don't even really want to speak about the political power of religious anti-abortion groups, because that in itself is so big and blatant, especially with what is going on in the US currently, where Donald Trump is throwing out laws left, right, and center, which quite frankly are very discriminatory in many different ways, and it is so blatant, it is so there. There is no way you can hide from it. It is just loud. The political affiliations and influences in Scotland, I really wanted to look more deeply into that. So, the anti-abortion movement in Scotland has found allies in political circles, often within socially conservative factions. The Scottish Conservatives, some members have expressed opposition to abortion rights or buffer zones. Right-wing and religious MPs, individual members of various parties, have lobbied against abortion protections. The House of Lords connections, some anti-abortion lobbyists have ties to lords who influence policies behind the scenes. So again, we are seeing a very repetitive thing where people have money, people know people in high power jobs, and they are wanting to control people. They are wanting to control the LGBTQ plus and women because they can, because they are enabled to be able to do that. And again, with money, how does this help the campaigns? Well, the anti-abortion groups run targeted Facebook and Instagram ads, often disguised as neutral pregnancy support services. They get funded to do fake research and reports. Studies spread false claims and about abortion safety and mental health risks. Some groups fund abstinence-only sex education programs that discourage abortion. Many donations come through third-party organizations, making it difficult to trace the exact source. Offshore funding routes, including through tax-exempt religious charities, help funnel money into Scotland's anti-abortion movement. Now, I feel like I don't need to go into it deeper about what myths that anti-abortion protesters talk about, but I will happily do that in another episode if you guys wanted that, because there is so much lies that has been spread and so much misinformation. But you guys who are listening have heard just wee snippets of what they have done and what they have said. Not only do these protests waste law enforcement's time, and the clinics and the cities often have to file lawsuits or take legal action to enforce buffer zones, diverting time and money from other critical issues. If you really do care about the person who is wanting to get an abortion, be with them by their side. Don't try and persuade them to do otherwise. Don't do what you think is best. Just understand, try and understand where the person is coming from with what their decision is. And just be there for them as a friend, as a family member. It is so simple just to comfort someone, especially if they do need it. But do not impose what you think should that person do and what you think is right. Because trust me, you might lose that friend or that family member. You might even put them in harm. There needs to be an understanding of this is somebody else's life, this isn't yours. So hopefully your takeaway from this podcast is protesters sadly won't stop. They will be funded by the government, they will be funded by political people in power, they will be funded by religious charities and religious campaigns. It won't stop. But what we can do to help is be by each other's sides. I feel like in the world today there needs to be a lot more love. And there needs to be a lot more consideration for the other people around you and what they're going through. This has been Behind the Paddle podcast with me, Paulson Victoria. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode all about abortion and how it can affect people, many, many different people, and how there needs to be more buffer zones and even more protection for those who are getting an abortion, whether they be cis women or people in the LGBTQ plus community. If you'd like to give us some feedback or a review on Spotify, Apple, wherever you're listening, that's great. You can even message in, or you could actually send us a tip if you want to see the spicier version of these podcast episodes, then you can go to our Dark Fans and our mini vids. But yeah, this has been Behind the Paddle podcast with me, Paulson Victoria. Bye.